So next up, we're going to talk about the play of transitional kindergarten and kindergarten age children. So as I said, it gets a little complicated with ages because preschool can have 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, or 5-year-olds, but transitional kindergarten often makes preschools be more the land of 2- and 3-year-olds and some 4-year-olds because transitional kindergarten is 4- and 5-year-olds, and then kindergarten is typically 5- and 6-year-olds. So we're going to kind of land in the sort of 4 to 6, 4 to 7-year-old range for this particular lecture. So first up is physical play. So for 5-year-olds, they are becoming much more coordinated. So gone is kind of the ungainliness of a preschool age child who is, getting more coordinated but isn't always quite there. 5-year-olds are typically pretty good at all the physical skills and enjoy showing off the things that they can do and reveling in their newfound independence and wanting to do things independently because they can. They have the skills that are needed to engage in sports. Now remember, sports are going to be hard because they're still young for engaging in games with rules. They're not quite there yet, which we'll talk about when we talk about object play, but they do have the skills. They can throw a ball, they can catch a ball, they can run, they can do all the things. It's just the rule-oriented nature of sports that makes it hard for them. Better to wait until children are 6 because at that point in time, children have a much better understanding of the rules and they have all the skills that they need. And they really like testing their physical limits, which is what sports do for children. And 6-year-olds tend to be very wiggly little friends and have a very hard time staying still. I was a kindergarten and first grade teacher in my elementary school days, and they are very wiggly little human beings, and in my opinion, they're required to sit way too much, and they need to be moving their bodies more. Steph was talking about the object play of children in transitional kindergarten and kindergarten. So remember, we are now in Piaget's pre-operational stage, and we already had the first substage, symbolic function, and now we're in the second substage, which is intuitive thought. So let's talk about some things that young children do related to thinking and their play with objects in this substage of intuitive thought. So it is not so much logical thinking in that they are mentally working through how things all get put together. It is relying on intuition and the way that things look. So this is why children often have a hard time with what Piaget calls the conservation tasks. So if you have a glass of water and you have another glass of water and they are both in short fat glasses and they have the same amount of water in them, children are able to say with certainty that the water in each glass is the same. But if you change one glass from a short fat glass to a tall skinny glass, but do not change the amount of water, preschoolers will be very confused about how much water there is, and they will generally say that the tall thin glass has more water because the water is up taller than the water in the short fat glass, because they are not able to logically think through that the water amount did not change. It just got poured from one vessel to another, and they are just judging it by the way the glass looks rather than by how much water is there. And that's very typical of children in this stage, to rely on the way things look. It's called centration, where you're so focused on one thing, the way the water looks in the glass, you're not able to consider the fact that no water came or left in that particular experiment. So preschoolers get very focused, they're very focused on the way that things look, and then they have a hard time mentally shifting gears because they're operating more off of intuition rather than logical thinking. So that is what this other piece is about lack of conservation ability. They don't understand that quantities stay the same even if they look different than they previously did. So Unless you're adding more or taking away something, you are not changing the quantity or the mass or the amount. You're just changing the way it looks visually, and that is very hard for children at this age. So another issue is that children have a hard time classifying objects. So if you give them blocks that have different shapes and colors, they can sort the blocks by shape or they can sort the blocks by color. But if you ask them to shift gears, if they've already classified by shape, and then you ask them if they could put together things that are alike in another way, they will get stuck and they won't be able to segue over to the attribute that they weren't previously using, because again, they are centering on the way that things look and what they've already done rather than on the way that things can be. So in terms of what children like to do at this age related to object play, they spend a lot of time in constructive and dramatic. We will take a look at that little graph on the next slide. They are getting into games with rules because now they have both the physical motor skills and the ability to understand the rules of a game, both a board game and a sports activity. They still like to engage in process-oriented kinds of things, but they are becoming much more interested in the products that they create and like to plan out what they're going to build and do and how they're going to achieve that. So moving away from process a little bit at this age. And they do like to be correct and compare themselves to others. I think an unfortunate aspect of schooling at this age is that we as adults often encourage children to compare themselves and to be correct, and we are kind of stressing them out because we are emphasizing that too much. We do not need to lean this hard into children's slight natural inclinations at this age. We are making it worse, and we are making them feel uncomfortable and stressed. So it is important to back off of the competitiveness and the comparativeness at this age, because we do not need to exacerbate that which children are already focused on anyway. So following up on our graph from our previous preschool play lecture, just to show you a little bit about what play looks like at these more TK and K ages. So you can see that sensory motor play has reduced dramatically for 5 and 6-year-olds. It's often gone or so minimal as to not be noticed for 7-year-olds, although they still do enjoy this kind of play. But definitely the balance has now shifted over to symbolic play or dramatic play and constructing things. And you can see that around age 7, we start to also add in games with rules, because children at this age really are enjoying sports and board games and all the things that have a more rule-oriented structure to them. So at this age, in terms of dramatic play, children are still very highly interested in the dramatic play that they're doing. You saw in that last slide that dramatic play is still definitely part of the TK early elementary school world. Children at this age like complex pretend play, where they're using active agent, object substitution, imaginary play with objects, cooperative, highly planful. They like fantasy and drama and all different kinds of themes to be able to play out. They do like fairly realistic props and costumes and themes at this age, but you don't have to buy everything for them. You can give them tools to be able to create their props and their costumes, and they are very capable of doing that with their writing and their drawing skills. Very social in terms of dramatic play, so really navigating who's going to do what, who's going to say what, how is the play going to go. So very much organized, structured, scripted, tells a story, all of those kinds of things. Something that you can start segueing over to is if you would like to have children do sort of like a little mini play where they have assigned roles and assigned dialogue, that they create props together. You can start to enter into that world, although you should give children still lots of opportunities to engage in free choice dramatic play where they are choosing the theme, the props, the players, etc. So don't start completely replacing that with more scripted kinds of opportunities. That should be fairly minimal at this particular age. Lots of good stuff to talk about with social play. So children are fully entrenched in cooperative play by this age. They may plan out who they're going to play with, how they're going to navigate that play. They may be the leader, sometimes they may be the follower, but very complex in terms of cooperative social play. So because they can now do these, they're generally able to do cooperative play and do it well, we'll kind of add on to some other things that they're doing in that cooperative play realm. So they may start to have a particular playmate that they really enjoy playing with and kind of have a mutual preference where two children agree that they're kind of the best buddies of each other. They should be able to consider the needs and interests of other children. So gone is the child who has a hard time cooperating and sharing. Children of this age should be very good at cooperation and sharing and taking turns and helping to devise a solution if there's some sort of conflict going on. It doesn't mean that they don't need adult support, but hopefully we've given them the tools and helped them to navigate social situations when they were younger so that they have the capability to do better with that when they are in these early elementary school ages. They should be able to work towards a common goal, like building a big sandcastle or building a big block tower or creating a sign for a dramatic play area, working together to put together a puzzle like these children in the picture. Negotiating what to play. So what would we like to do? What game would we like to play? How would we like to play it? What props do we need? So talking with each other, navigating those social situations. It's a very social age. Children definitely like to spend their time with peers and playmates, not by themselves, not so much with adults. They really like to play with other children. Now, although I did say that gone is the child who really can't share and has a hard time taking turns, that does not mean that they're going to like to share their favorite stuff. I don't like to share my favorite stuff. So no small wonder that children of this age also struggle to share their most favorite treasured items. And, maybe those are things that should just stay home and be at home so that children don't have to figure out how to negotiate that. And then children of this age are, again, they can play games with rules, especially once they get 6 to 7 years old. They do understand why rules are important. They enjoy those kinds of games, but they get frustrated when the rules change. So you will see children of this age arguing a lot about the rules and changing the rules, and you can't do that because the rule says you're supposed to do it this way, because their understanding of rules is new and kind of rigid at this age. It takes time and developmental change to understand that rules are not static and they're not always set in stone, and they can be negotiated, but not really at this age. So what kinds of materials are good for children at this age? So there's 2 places in your textbook that I would point you to. You're going to see that the list looks very similar to what preschool age children need because these are still young children in the early childhood period. So early childhood goes from age 0 to age 8. And in the early childhood period, children should spend a large amount of their time playing with open-ended child-directed materials. So that's where you're going to see a lot of overlap in the kinds of materials that are good for children across the 3 age groups of infant, toddler, preschool, and TKK. So go back and look at the figure 5.3 in the preschool play chapter. You can also look at figure 6.1 in the school age chapter on pages 204 to 207. And just a reminder, as I just said, that the bottom line is that play-based learning is good for children of all ages, but particularly those between ages 0 to 8 in that early childhood period when play is really critical and a leading source of development and has so many wonderful developmental benefits like we've already talked about before. So the article that I had you read on play related to children in transitional kindergarten and kindergarten, there wasn't a chapter in your book that specifically covered that age group, so I added in this reading for you. And in that reading, they talk about 3 kinds of play that are important for children to engage in. One is child-directed play, one is risky play, and the other is inclusive play. So child-directed play we're actually going to come to when we talk about the role of the adult. So that's in an upcoming lecture. We're going to talk about risky play when we get to the importance of nature play for children. So these are both upcoming. And we actually will be touching a little bit on inclusive play later when we talk about play and culture and play and socioeconomic status and play and gender. But to kind of capture it in one lecture, I thought that that was a good one for us to focus on today, because again, we will be catching child-directed play and risky play in a few lectures, but we'll talk about inclusive play today. So I'm not going to go over this slide in great depth because this is something that we're going to be covering in upcoming lectures, what children understand about other people and how that changes by age, but I did want you to have some preliminary information and then we'll go over it in future lectures. But what I really want you to see is that what children understand about various aspects of diversity, like gender, race, culture, socioeconomic status, and ability, change depending on what age they are. So typically what we see is that by 3 or 4, children can understand kind of how people are different from one another, that maybe they have different color skin, that they have different abilities from each other, that children of different biological sexes and genders might engage in different behaviors from each other or dress differently, that people from different places may speak different languages or eat different foods or celebrate different holidays, that people who have more money and people who have less money buy different things from each other, live in different kinds of houses. So very young children are definitely noticing all these differences, and when they first start learning about these differences, their categories about those things are kind of rigid. So they don't believe that you can stay a girl if you cut your hair because short hair is for boys, or they may not, they may have feelings about their own language and the languages of other people, or not understand that just because someone has different abilities doesn't mean that they're younger. Oftentimes children, like if a child is in a wheelchair, has difficulty walking, they may think that child is a baby, even though that child is the same age as themselves. So their cognitive understanding of categories of people and categories of things in the world tends to be kind of strict at the beginning as they're just learning how to categorize those things, and then becomes a little bit more relaxed over time. Now, the bummer is that even though children relax a little bit and they're a little more open to difference and categories of people and sort of who fits where, sometimes they kind of go the opposite direction, and then they start acquiring stereotypes and prejudices, and they might behave in biased ways towards people. And this really depends on what kind of experiences they've had when they're small. If children have had experiences where diversity is celebrated and welcomed and part of their daily existence, children are much more likely to be open to diversity and positive about diversity and positive about people who are different than themselves. But children who have been taught that diversity is not positive, haven't had access to diversity, have heard active messages telling them that people who are different than themselves are less than, then they can easily acquire those discriminatory attitudes and behaviors fairly early on. So that said, that children see difference, recognize difference, can grow into difference in either positive or negative ways, we want to make sure that children have the kinds of experiences that foster a more positive attitude towards diversity and not lean into those stereotypes, biases, discriminatory behaviors. So our job as early educators is to make sure that children understand that difference is good, not just that people are different, but that difference is good, that the world is a better place because people are different from one another, that there's beauty and wonder in the different kinds of ways that people do things and the different ways that people look and the different ways that people speak. Also helping children to understand that difference is part of life, but also sameness is part of life, that as humans, we all have basic needs in common, that we all need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to have family and friends and be loved, and those are all common basic needs. So difference is there and it's good, but also there are things that bind us and make us all human. It's important for us to make sure that we actively address bias. If children say things that are unfriendly or mean or are not helpful or kind to one another, to talk about that. So if a child does ever say that a child in a wheelchair is a baby, it's very important to address that and say that they are not a baby, that they are the same age as the other children in the class, but that their legs work different, and that that is a good thing. And sometimes we all have body parts that don't work the same as each other, and that is okay. Include people's families. So get to know children's families, get to know the kinds of things that they do at home. That will give you a much better sense of the child themselves and what their needs are and what they enjoy and how to best include them in the classroom. Make sure that you are including in your classroom things that are relevant to all children. I would encourage you to take a look at the link, Supporting Cultural and Linguistic Diversity in Childhood, so you can see how to make a curriculum that is relevant to the children, their interests, their backgrounds, their diverse experiences. Help children to feel good about themselves and to feel good about other people. So one of the ways that we can be socially competent is to be kind to others and include others and treat other people equitably and include them in all the things that we're doing, and also demand from other people that they treat us with kindness and respect, and that we like ourselves and we enjoy all the things that make us the same and different as everyone else. So there are some great things that we can do to make sure that everybody gets the skills and abilities and opportunities that they need. So making sure to think about how to make activities and experiences inclusive. An example of inclusivity is captions. Now, I'm not saying that we should include captioning with young children, but I'm giving this as an example of a practice that was originally primarily for people who are deaf, but has turned out to be a great thing for lots of people. I enjoy captions because sometimes it's hard to hear what people are saying, and then I can make sure that I can follow along if I can both listen and read. So that is a thing that is good for people with disabilities, but is also good for all people. And that's what we need to think about, is how can we make experiences and activities and opportunities that are good for all children. So take a look at meaningful inclusion in early childhood, that link. Including or encouraging all children to interact with each other. So finding those commonalities, finding ways for children to connect with each other, making sure that when we include children with disabilities in classrooms with children who are typically developing, that we are thinking about how to best navigate that so everybody feels comfortable and confident and has the ability to interact with one another. So a good article to read here is Preparing Young Children for the Inclusion of Children with Disabilities into the Classroom by NAEYC. And then finally, it is okay for children to ask questions and for you to answer. Now, this particular link is about talking to children about disabilities, but I would encourage you to think about how to talk authentically with children about race, culture, all the different kinds of things they might encounter. So when my daughter was very, very small, she was interacting with one of her teachers who was a Black teacher and had very dark skin. My child is very pale, and she was touching his arm and he was commenting on what she was seeing. He was talking about his own skin and what color his skin was, and then pointing at her arm and talking about what color her skin was, We don't create bias and discrimination and stereotypes by talking authentically with children about what they see. We create those things when we act like things are bad or when we create fear around situations. So it is okay to talk about what children are noticing, talk about differences that they're seeing, talk with them authentically about the world around them.